You are an agent. You've been an agent for 4 years. You're an author. You have a published book by BiggerPockets. In case you haven't heard it, it's the house hacking guide, how you did 100 deals in your first year. This is The Agent Goldmine, where you'll find real talk, and ambition. We're here to build real businesses and be more than your average agent. We want to know what the killers are actually doing within their businesses, the reality of it. All tactical, no fluff. So we're here to find out. Please share and enjoy. Welcome back to The Agent Goldmine. Today we have Craig Curelop. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to go into your stats so people know who you are in case they haven't heard you before. You are an agent. You've been an agent for 4 years. You're an author. You have a published book by BiggerPockets. In case you haven't heard it, it's the house hacking guide. Please go check it out because it's a really good book. If I may say so myself, I am a proud owner of the book. You are a podcast host of a podcast called Investify, and you have a team. You have a team of 18 agents. You started out in that team in Denver, and you have currently moved out of Denver. So now you're managing a team, total team leader, so many different directions that we can go in this podcast. I'm super excited. I want to start and dive deep on how you did 100 deals in your first year. Craig, thanks for joining.
Yeah, Ali, Shelby, thanks so much for having me on. It's always fun to hop on and hang out with you guys. So yeah, I mean, you said everything about me, but I guess we can kick it off with that first year, right? I think I had a pretty atypical year for most real estate agents. Usually people's first year is really bad. My first year was the best year pretty much I ever had, I think, mainly because I built a team after that. And so, the reason for that, though, wasn't just because I got super lucky. I did get a little lucky, but it all kind of started, a couple of years prior to that, when I was working at BiggerPockets and I had the opportunity to write for their blog. Now, at that time, I had 0 rental properties. I had maybe $100,000 in savings, most of which was just my 401k. And I just started writing for the blog based on things I read in books and maybe add a little spin on it and stuff like that, right? So it kind of started off just like that. Then within a couple months, I did my first deal. Then I started writing about my first deal, how the numbers worked, how I found it, et cetera, et cetera. And then I started becoming more and more experienced and started writing for the BiggerPockets blog. I started having a name for myself. And then because I was writing for the BiggerPockets blog on my own time, not getting paid, like literally $0 made in 2 years on this whole endeavor of writing for their blog, Scott, the CEO of BiggerPockets at the time, asked me if I wanted to write the book on house hacking. And I said, of course I do. And so then I went ahead, instead of writing blog posts every week, I started just writing a chapter of a book every week, basically. And within a few months, I had the book written. It got published. And when you publish a book, the whole goal is to sell the book. And so the way you sell books these days, or a very popular way, is to go on as many podcasts as you possibly can. So I did like 100 and something podcasts, probably, pitching the book. And in each podcast, I just told people that I was a real estate agent in the Denver market that specializes in helping house hackers find their investment properties. And at the time, there were very few investor-friendly real estate agents out there. This was back in like 2018, 2019. And then everything just blew up from there, right? So, and then that's when I actually started actively being a real estate agent, is right after I wrote the book. And so that was my first year as an agent technically, but I would say the work started probably a couple of years prior to that. I got a little bit lucky with given the opportunity to write the book, but I also wrote 50 or 60 articles not getting paid before writing the book, right? And so yeah, that's basically how it all started.
Dude, I've actually never heard that story before, and we've been
Really?
friends for years. Yeah, I can't believe I haven't. Dude, I love how you did so much for free. You mentioned that you did it on your own time, writing these blogs for BiggerPockets, not asking for compensation, just putting in the work. And then because of those efforts, you were presented an opportunity. And then when that opportunity came, you just freaking grabbed it. And I think that that's a really valuable lesson in general, where it's like, don't be afraid to put in the work, even if you feel like you're not getting directly compensated, because the experiences, you built a name for yourself. You became a good writer through those reps, led to an opportunity that you wouldn't have been ready for if you had put in the work earlier before.
Yeah,
So that's
it is.
Awesome.
Totally. And I wish I knew that was what I was thinking when I didn't have that kind of foresight. Right. And so I just want everyone listening to, if there is someone you want to get around, you could be a little more intentional than I was about it. And just how can you bring them value? I'm sure any real estate agent who has a website, in order to rank higher in Google, you need to consistently be adding pages and updating things to your website. So it needs to be a living site. Well, a blog would be great for that. Hey, if there's like a rock star agent you notice out there that doesn't have much of a blog or an online presence, ask them, hey, could you write a blog post a week for them? And now with like Chat GPT and stuff, you could get 50% of that blog post written, and then you make it sound more like a human. And you're doing this guy a favor for something, knowing that when an opportunity comes, you're going to be the first guy that he thinks of. And so I think it's just a huge, yeah. I'd recommend anybody do that.
Sometimes it's a lot of, what is it, like chicken or the egg first? Like, do I hop on a podcast, but I have no real background, or do I build a background and then hop on the podcast? Um, I want to, with the 100 podcasts in a span of how long, and do you know what podcasts? Well, obviously you know what podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I couldn't name all of them. No way. I would say there was like a big spreadsheet of a list, and we just checked them all off. I'd say probably within like 3 or 4 months, I was on about 100 podcasts. We tried to schedule the release all around the book launch date. And so, yeah, it was a hustle for sure. And then like things start, and then you start, and then obviously you're getting referrals and stuff off of that. But the funny thing is like, talk about just like winging it, is the first podcast. Do you know the first podcast I was ever on?
Don't tell me it was BiggerPockets.
It was the BiggerPockets real estate podcast.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Wow.
That was my first podcast. Yeah, that was my first podcast. I had, and that was like my dream, was to be on that podcast. And then
That's
there
adorable.
we were, right? And so, and literally the only reason I was on that podcast was I was eating lunch. Like, I don't think anyone knows this story either. I was eating lunch with Josh Dorkin, the founder and the host of the podcast at the time, and I was telling him how I was like living behind the curtain, renting out my place, renting out my car, like doing all this. He's like, dude, we have you on the podcast. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And literally zero podcast experience. But then my first one was in front of 300, 400,000 people. Right. And that's how it all starts. Right. So just take those opportunities when they come.
And you mentioned we too, like we had a checklist. That's you and BiggerPockets, right? For the publisher.
Yeah, I guess I should say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess that's like one of the benefits of publishing with BiggerPockets, and someone with a brand. Not to get like too deep on this, but just in case, I guess somebody in our audience is considering writing a book, or maybe is already in the process of, like, the question of publishing yourself versus publishing with a brand, an already established brand. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, I have a really mixed thoughts here. So these days, anyone can publish a book. This guy Chandler Bolt wrote a book called Publish, which is phenomenal. If you want to self-publish, that's the book to read. That should be your guide. And the good thing about it is that you're going to consistently be pitching your own book, right? And so, like, even years later, you'll be saying, "Hey, read the book, read the book, read the book." However, when you publish through a publishing company, they give you a lot of attention for a couple of months. And then when the next book comes along, you're kind of put to the wayside, and you don't get nearly as much sales as you would if you were just doing it yourself. And of course, they're taking a pretty big cut. The publisher is, and so I'd say for your first one, if you can get a publishing deal, I think it's good because they'll get your name out there. That's really the most important thing. Like, I'm not making that much money off of the book, but I made a lot off of indirectly from the book, just giving myself credibility, a published author on BiggerPockets. And now people actually know, like, and trust me. Versus if I just self-publish a book, there's not really much credibility there, right? Because anybody can publish a book. So
I think that makes sense. And the cool thing too with like the book is such a huge, you said credibility. It is huge because I feel like even to this day, which is years later after you wrote the book, are you still speaking at BiggerPockets this year? I know you did last year, right?
Yes, I'm actually on 2 panels this year.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and so that in itself too, it's a repeat. Would be another pro, I guess, on the side of publishing with a bigger company, is that there's like also repeat opportunities where it's not just the book, but it's like, oh, we should have him back because he also authored this book and has credibility within our community. And it's each year, it's like another push in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like they're definitely keeping me in mind because my book is on their website and they cut me a check every quarter. So like, they I think I'm top of mind for sure. But yeah, I think and it's just like the partnership that you start when you write a book with a publishing company. Like if you want to be in a relationship with that publishing company, then great, right? I mean, I love BiggerPockets, right? And so I'm happy to be in a partnership with them.
In a relationship. How, I don't know if you want to answer this. I'm so curious because I've considered writing a book because I saw Chandler Bolt on freaking stage last year and he got me all pumped up. I was like, I'm going to write 4 books this year and like have not. That's fine. But
Yeah.
curious about money. Are you willing to share how much you made in the beginning versus like what that looks like now? Is that something you're allowed to share?
Thank you for listening. Out of respect for your time, we want to make this show as valuable as possible for you. So if you have any feedback on how we can improve, please let us know. DM us at Allie the Agent and The Shelby Show.
Sure, I'll share it. I think it's fine. So during the launch, so the launch is going to probably be the biggest month that you have, the biggest quarter you have, and so in that first quarter, I made like 15 grand off the book, which was like pretty sweet. And after that, it pretty much went down to between like 2 and 3 grand a quarter. And now, a couple years later, it's probably around 1,000 a quarter. So it's not big money. It's really not, right? Bigger Pockets takes a pretty big chunk of it. And I don't know, like I think obviously personally, this is like my book of the like 50 they have. I think they could like continuously pitch it better because house hacking is mentioned in a lot of their podcasts. And I think it's just not top of mind because it's not the host's book that wrote it. So they just talk about house hacking is a great strategy, but then don't mention the book. But I think if how should I say this? Like if the house hacking strategy book was top of mind, then it would probably sell more when it's consistently being like mentioned on that podcast over and over and over again. Right.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so you're jumping on a bunch of podcasts and you're getting a lot of referrals and it's your first year. How are you handling all of these referrals that a lot of other agents, they wish that they had that many, but also there needs to be a process. So, what was your leverage like and how did you handle such a volume?
Yeah. So I mean the process was pretty simple, right? I always would start off with like an initial phone call. And right, like I wasn't coached by anybody in the real estate space. Buyer's presentation, I had no idea what that was, didn't even know what that meant. And honestly, we still don't even do like official buyer's presentations. All I did was hop on, I called it an initial phone call, like a get to know you call. And so, be 15 minutes, 30 at the most. And we just get to know, hey, what are you looking for? What kind of house hack do you want to do? Where are you on the comfortability spectrum? Et cetera, et cetera. Once I have all those answers, then I know exactly what type of house they're looking for and exactly what type of neighborhood they want and exactly the price range they want. We set them up on a search, set them up with a lender. And then after that, I just follow up every couple of days to see if they want to go see some houses. And my goal was, and I did this quite frequently, was from Saturday morning at 10 a.m. through Sunday night at about 6 p.m., I wanted to be showing houses. And so that would basically give me enough time to show houses to 4 different clients, 10 to 2, and then like 3 to 6 or whatever. And I would do that pretty consistently, weekend over weekend over weekend. And of each client would probably see 4 or 5 houses. And of those 4 or 5, almost, I don't want to say every time, but almost every time there was one that was good enough to put an offer in on. And then probably I would usually have 2 to 4 accepted each weekend. Like there were some weekends where I was like 4 for 4, which was awesome. And then they got so excited that, they maybe want to, if they didn't get it, they might go and try to check another one out on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Right. And so weekend was reserved for showings. Weeks were just like taking client calls, writing contracts, negotiating inspections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, like that was my life. Like I really did not do anything that year except real estate. Now it was helpful that COVID was also during that year and I couldn't do anything. Like everything was shut down. And so yeah, that was, again, it could have been kind of like a perfect storm of a year for me, but that's what happened. That's my story.
With tracking. So you have people reaching out to you probably in all different avenues, right? Did you collect them, consolidate them, and track them on your own? Or did you have like an admin or a CRM, or how did you track?
I think at that time, I just had a free CRM. Is Podio a CRM? I think it was Podio. or maybe even KV Core. I can't remember, but it was, I think if Podio is a CRM, and I'm not thinking of a different company, it was Podio and then KV Core. And so that was like good enough for me for a while, where I would just like throw somebody in there, throw their notes in there. And then I would always have a task and to do. This is something that we tell our agents all the time, is like, if there's not a task or a to do on every single lead, then the lead is a dead lead, and we kick it to the pond and let someone else go take care of it. Because if it's not in your CRM, you're just not going to remember it. And so that's how I track it, right? It's like based on their timeline, based on whenever that was happening. I would set up notifications saying, hey, like, do you want to go look at houses this weekend? And I'd ask them to send me a list of 5 or 6 that they liked. And if they couldn't whittle it down to 5 or 6, I said, okay, give me 10 or 15 and I'll whittle it down to 5 or 6 for you. Because I knew just by looking at the pictures in the area, whether the house was going to work or not based on their goals. And so, yeah, we'd go and then like, that's kind of like the first part of it, right? Is getting people in actually wanting pre-approved and wanting to do showings. The next part is actually getting them to write contracts and want to put in offers, which I can explain that if we're done on this part. But yeah, do you have any other questions?
Yes, please. That's exactly where I wanted to go, is like qualifying the lead, especially working with investors, is sometimes very hard because they don't have to pull the trigger, right? They're not military. They're not being forced to move. Investors can take their sweet time. So yes, please head into that.
Totally. So investors are tough. Honestly, I don't even love working with 20% down investors because they nickel and dime. It's really hard. And it's like really hard to just get deals done. House hackers, who are investors, but just in a different way, I think are a different breed, because these guys, and I can explain this pretty clearly, and you can do the math out, and it's 100% true, is the quicker you get into the deal, the better off you're going to be. And so if you can do the math of like, let's say, Shelby, you're an amazing house hacker, right? You're going to buy a deal every year on the year for 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you're going to have 5 houses. They're each going to be cash flowing. Let's say they each cash flow like 500 each. That's like kind of a lower end of what a house hack would cash flow in the Denver market. And so you now at the end of year 5, you've got 5 houses, $2,500 of passive income. Those houses have probably appreciated at least $500,000. And so now you're like sitting pretty good. Allie, let's say like you wait, right? Like you get a deal every 18 months because you're really trying to find a killer deal. But instead of cash flowing 500, you cash flow 600 because you're going to get $20,000 discount, which is about $100 a month. And so now, but you can only get a property every year for the next 3 years. But basically, so in that 5-year period, you'll only get 3 house hacks. And so now you've got about $1,800 of cash flow. Shelby's still winning. You know, your properties, if they each cash flow $100,000 each, right? Now you've got $300,000 of equity. Shelby is still winning. And what's going to happen when like these properties are paid off, right? Shelby is going to have a lot more money, a lot more cash flow than you. And so like, of course, I'm not actually picking on you guys individually, but that's the whole point, is like the getting the best deal on a house doesn't matter. It's just getting deal after deal after deal after deal, because with house hacking, there is a timer, and that timer is the 1 year from closing. And if you let that extend too long, you're going to miss out on a lot of equity and a lot of cash flow.
Yeah.
And buyers understand.
So, yeah. And that is what you write about in your book as well. So I'm sure the book was a lot of leverage for a lot of the conversations to not have to have the same conversations with every single client. With the investors that were reaching out to you in qualifying them, would you also turn into a coach too? Because working as an agent, investor-friendly agent, I think takes more time, because a lot of times they're asking you to coach them and then they don't even have to pull the trigger at the end. Are you running the numbers? Are you coaching them? How much extra time was that?
Yeah, so there's definitely a coaching element. I guess I don't know how much extra time it is because it's the only way I've known. But I would say that, you know, if they've read the book, most people who come to me, right, they've read the book, they've listened to the podcast. They're not just like, I think I saw you on this TikTok, whatever. Like, they know that they want to do this and they've done the research to understand it. I'm just there to give them the numbers to plug into their calculators. And if they want me to like double check their numbers all day, that takes me 2 minutes, right? And so it's really not that much more time. And I think the kicker too is that when we go show houses, right? We'll get into this a little bit too, is when we go show houses, I knew, and I still know, in our market, how much a room is going to rent for, whether it's a downstairs or an upstairs, whether it's a master bedroom or a regular room, whether it's got a little bit extra, like whatever. Like there's, I could tell you almost exactly what the rooms would rent for. I can tell you what you can get on Airbnb, what you can get as a long-term rental. So I knew all those numbers on the top of my head in each area that Denver, in all the Denver metro. So whether it's Westminster, Arvada, Aurora, whatever. And so knowing that number, right, makes me look like a professional walking in the house. And I also knew what the mortgage payments were going to be based on the price. Knowing I could probably get it within $100, right, with including interest, taxes, insurance, principal, all the whole thing, PITI. And so I would go in there and I'd be like, okay, so this is a 5-bedroom house. You could probably rent out each room for about $700. The master you might get $800 for. So, this is a $3,600 in rent. Your mortgage payment is going to be about $2,700. You're going to make $900 over the mortgage. You'll probably want to set aside $400 or $500 in reserves. You're going to cash flow about $400 or $500 in this thing. How's that sound? And people are like, dang, okay. Right? That sounds pretty good. And so then in like every house I would do that. And you just run that back with the napkin math. And then if you get under contract, then you can go and dig in onto the numbers a little bit more. But you kind of want to just thumb it to put in the offer. And then you've got a week during your due diligence period to make sure that your numbers are good. And I don't think I've ever had a time where I was like extremely off to where like they decided to back out of the deal because I was way off. And so I think that's really important too.
People listening to this are like, I want that. I want to be able to walk into a house and know every bit of how a room rents or what it would do on Airbnb per area, all of that stuff. But there's no USB thing that you can plug into your brain and then download that information. So for you, how did you build that?
Not yet. Yeah.
Not yet.
Honestly, I did it mostly I guess I didn't start that way. But pretty soon into it, I just knew what things would rent for in each area because I had done so many. And I guess that's the honest answer. But the helpful answer would be to look at download a spreadsheet or whatever, right? And go look on Facebook Marketplace or go look on the places to rent rooms, whatever strategy your market calls for, and figure out like, hey, okay, this is going to be the average rent for a master. This is going to be the average rent for a regular bedroom. This is going to be, go on AirDNA and figure out what you can get for a 2-1 in each neighborhood on AirDNA per month on average. And like, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be like within 10% in each way, probably, or maybe even 20. Like you just have to give them a good ballpark, right? And then you let them, and then when it's actually time to go under contract, you double check your numbers. But just being able to walk into a house and say that optically to your client shows them that you've done research, you're very knowledgeable, you've done this before, and you know exactly what numbers to look out for.
Craig, we can take this in so many different directions. What do you want to talk about? Which direction? Because you're on a lot of podcasts. What do you most like talking about related to agent stuff?
Or I can keep asking questions if you don't want to think.
Yeah, I haven't talked that much about being just like an agent. Like usually, like a lot of people are talking about the team, which I'm fine talking about the team. I think like house hacking, I've definitely done the most on by far, and that's probably exhausted. But yeah, I don't know. Whatever. If you guys want to lean more into, if you have more questions on, like if your audience is more agent people, then I would say like let's just dig into like how I was a good agent, and then if they're not, and then we can talk on like 5 minutes at the end about the team.
Okay, I love that answer with the spreadsheet. Just there is no shortcut. Ooh, I cursed. There is no shortcut. Like open a spreadsheet, do the research, look on all the different platforms, collect the data, analyze the data, commit it to memory, and then take the data that and go out into real life and live it. And I feel like I get the same thing where it's like, man, I see how Craig just rattled that off and like, I want that, but there's no shortcut. You can't replace those steps to build the knowledge in your head. Yo, real quick, this podcast is not free. Cost of admission is sharing with a buddy who'd benefit or throwing it on your Instagram story. Tag us, we'll reshare that. At this point, you have them, you just got them under contract. Congratulations. You're doing 100 this year. How are you managing contract to close?
So yeah, so contract to close, Yeah, this was definitely the part that changed the most, right? This is the part that where I actually needed to hire people and actually like start making this somewhat of a business, which means just involving other people. My first hire was a transaction coordinator, and you need to find a good transaction coordinator, like crucial, because this person is basically ideally you gave your client off to your transaction coordinator once you're under contract. She handles the inspection. She handles all those disclosures and all the documents and all the million things that have to be signed, all the deadlines that they have to track. I don't want to handle any of that. Just no space in my brain for that. And so you hand them off to your transaction coordinator. She pretty much takes it from there all the way to closing. The only two things that I deal with after going under contract is inspection objection, which is basically like, hey, you do the inspection. What are things that actually need to be addressed and whatnot, like that negotiation piece. And if the appraisal comes in low, I'll help negotiate that. And so that's the only two things that I'm doing when under contract. So really, once under contract happens, I'm doing very little work. And so that was a big reason why, I was able to just focus on the showings and the contract writing and getting new clients in. And that's a big part of how I was able to do 100 deals per year. And so any questions there? Or do you want me to, I can get right into like the inspection objection and how I handle that.
I have one. With the TC, doing 100 deals a year, did you have one TC? Was that only in-house or multiple TCs?
I had one TC, and she had another client. It was actually her sister who did 300 deals in a year. Mostly like new build stuff and all that, right? And so she was quite busy with two of us, but I know she took on other clients as well. And she kind of had like her own little empire. I worked primarily with like the head honcho. I think maybe if she had other agents that only did a few deals a year, she probably gave them to like whatever her help. But yeah, and I was just one person, and she was awesome.
Cool, nice. Okay, please continue.
Okay, so now we've got this client under contract. The transaction coordinator is involved. The inspection gets set up so I'm not doing any of this. And now the inspection comes back. Now I'm going to look for the inspection first, and I'm going to look at the big stuff, right? I'm going to look at the roof. I'm going to look at the electrical, the plumbing, think all the house systems that actually make the house run. And I will probably come up with a list of 7 to 10 items that I think should be addressed. And then I'll basically write up in an email to my buyer, hey, looked over your inspection report. Here are the items that I think need to be addressed. And I'll bold like maybe 2 or 3 of those items. And I say the bold ones are like deal breakers. This is like what needs to be done. Otherwise, and this other stuff is just there basically. So like, again, just because might as well ask for it, right? And so then if they're good with it, they'll just give me a thumbs up and be like, yeah, I agree. If we have to hop on the phone to discuss it, I'm happy to hop on the phone to discuss it. But I'd say 75% of the time, I don't need to hop on the phone. And so then, yeah, once that inspection objection is signed, given with the criteria that we're asking for, we send it over to the listing agent, and then that negotiation just opens up. But I will say, I missed this part. Before the inspection, I will always warn my clients that the inspection is the worst part of the whole deal. This whole thing is an emotional roller coaster, and the inspection is when you're going to it's the low of the low. The house is after doing the inspection, you feel like the house is going to blow up. There's no way it's going to happen because the inspector, all they do is call it the bad things. They don't say, oh, the electric looks great, or, oh, the roof has been newly updated. They just say like meets criteria. Like it's like super not mushy gushy, right? And so preparing the client for that, and then when the report comes back, making sure that you clearly you understand what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done, what's serious and what's not serious. And then, you just ask them, hey, is there anything else that you're concerned with here?
Totally agree with you on the inspector. And that is a huge portion of the client expectations, especially if it's a buyer's first, well, not even if it's a buyer's first time. I mean, there are some inspection reports that I've read where I got scared of a sidewalk. You know how like little the sidewalks meet? Sometimes like one is a little bit higher when they meet. Dude, this one inspector, oh my gosh, wrote it up as if someone was going to fall, break their neck, trip, sue them. And it's crazy. So yeah, you have to talk to your clients and be like, hey, the report will be 60 pages at least. And everything is, it's just all about the client expectations.
Does the inspector send the inspection direct to you and then you collect maybe all inspections and send a consolidated version to the client? Or do the inspections like go to the client how does your process work?
So our process works is like we have one inspector that inspects everything. So there's only usually one inspection, and it'll be me and the client on like the portal. And when it's uploaded, we'll get a notification, and then you go and click and download it. Is how at least the inspector that we use does it. And so yeah, so we're looking at the same report. When I put in my inspection and I put the items, I'll put the number that is associated in, like the inspection report is labeled, right? It's like roof is like 1.4.3 and then like whatever. So I'll put in the numbers that I'm talking about, and then I'll write up a little one sentence thing that says, hey, the seller needs to address this. So the buyer can easily go back and see what I'm talking about. The agent can easily go and see what I'm talking about. And just getting through that inspection report is probably, I mean, if you can get through that, you've got like a 90% chance of closing. So getting through that is very important.
Totally. In North Carolina, we have at least 2 inspections we have the termite and then the home inspection too. And so what I used to do, because what I found is like, if the inspections go directly to the client, they're going to read it. They're going to start freaking out and building up all of these, crazy house explosion things in their head. So I did this sometime, do it or not, but like I would ask the inspector to send the results to me and I would go through them first and pull out everything. And then once I had my then I would send to the client, to review. So I was just curious if that was like a normal thing or whatever. But
yeah,
okay.
No, that's funny. I guess I've never had that problem of a client like freaking out. I think because I've set the expectations and I said, hey, this is going to look scary. We'll go over it together and we'll make sure that it looks good. And so I think setting that expectation is crucial.
Totally. And then how about the appraisal too? So is that traditionally like a big issue, or do things normally appraise? Like talk us about the appraisal part.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, most times things appraise. I'd say maybe 20% they don't, and it's all expectations, right? So I'll say, okay, we got through the inspection. The next step is the appraisal. Now, if the appraisal comes in at or above value, we're good to go. Now, if it comes in low, there's going to be a little bit of a negotiation that opens up. And so either what's going to happen is either you have to bring more cash to the table, the seller reduces the price, or you meet somewhere in the middle. And so they kind of understand that. We get the appraisal back, and whatever happens, happens. If the appraisal does come back low, the first thing we'll do is dispute it. And I always dispute it if it comes back low. And I just try to figure out some way to somehow justify it just for a prayer. And honestly, I'm probably like 50% hit rate on getting appraisals updated, which I've heard is good. Like other agents on our team are like, how are you getting 50%? They get maybe 5%. And so I think coming up with good comps, good reasoning, being really nice to the appraiser, and just like justifying why you think the price should be at the purchase price versus what the appraised value came back at is huge. And then your client will also see, hey, like he's going to battle for you. He wants that appraisal to come up, so there's less cash out of pocket. The seller's happy because the seller is going to get the money that they want instead of having to come down. And so like me and the listing agent will actually work together to get this appraisal thing figured out in an appraisal dispute. And then, and then again, 50% of the time for us, at least, it comes back good. The other 50% of the time it doesn't. And then you have to have that conversation with your buyer. Hey, do you want to back out? Is the seller willing to come down on price, or can we meet somewhere in the middle?
Cool. So then at that point, they either cancel out of that transaction, they continue looking back to, the drawing board, or they can close. After closing, what's your follow-up like your tempo, being that these are house hackers, so they want to purchase another one in the next 12, 15 months?
Apple listeners, this short pause is to ask you for a review. Here's how to do it. Back out of the specific episode, go to the page where you see all the episodes, scroll down, keep scrolling. Perfect. Now tap those 5 stars. Thank you so much. Back to the show.
Yeah. So after about a month or so, we'll of course, congratulations. After a week, I'll ask how they're settling in and stuff like that. And then after a month, I'll just ask if they got the place rented or if they need any help, with any of that. And we give our clients everything we've got in terms of helping them get it rented. And just like helping them manage the property. And then we also invite them, we've got a meetup. Someone on our team is throwing a meetup every week, but we throw our big meetup once a month. And so we'll throw a meetup, give them our meetup, and we'll just say, hey, come to the meetup and like, just come hang out, meet some other people that are house share the love. And that's usually kind of the cadence. And And then, maybe 6 months in, 9 months in, I'll ask how the house is doing, what the numbers look like. Ideally, I'll make some sort of I'll create an Instagram post or some sort of content on it to show that, hey, this is possible in the Denver area. That was another huge way I was getting a lot of clients too, was I would take my clients' deals and ask if it was okay if I shared their numbers. And 99% of the time, they're going to say yes. And you say, hey, this guy purchased the house for 500. He put 20% down. His monthly payment is 3,000. And you just show those numbers. You show the cash flow. You show the ROI. And the ROI on a house hack is insane. Like almost all the ROIs are 50, 60, 80, 100% plus. That's cash on cash. And then you think of NWROI, the net worth return on investment, and you're well over 100%. So people are seeing those numbers again and again and again and realizing this isn't luck. This is very, very repeatable, and they want in on that action. So then you get a DM and you say, hey, I want to find a deal just like that. Can you help me? Absolutely. Right. And then the process starts again. And so, so I think it's just keeping in touch just like that, and just kind of being through this process, you kind of become friends with people too. And so you just be their friend.
Yeah. And I mean, you have a lot of in common in the people on your team too, because it's you guys are also house hackers. You've done it, you've lived it, and you have aligned interests. So it makes a lot of sense that you would be friends and they would feel connected with you genuinely.
Totally.
Craig, looking ahead for the next 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, no, just kidding. Let's do 10. What do you think the 10-year future holds?
Yeah. So if we fast forward a little bit, right, obviously now I've got the team of investor-friendly agents, team of just residential real estate agents, and we're really just looking to grow that, right, doing more and more transactions. We do that a lot by, we started a podcast as well. Allie knows a little bit about it. She's the co-host of Investify. And so, so there's that piece of it, right? But there's also just cultivating that investor community and that financial freedom community. And our big, hairy, audacious goal on our team is to reduce the U.S. retirement age from 65 to 55, right? And we're not going to do that by having everybody retire by 55. We're going to do that by having a small minority of the population maybe retire in their 30s or 40s, right? By being able to house hack every year for 6 or 7 years, and then you can retire and do what you want. You don't have to work a W-2. And so that's the big dream for the investor side. The residential side is that we're realizing that we don't want to be too concentrated in one space with one type of clientele, because what if something happens? And so now we're working more towards the traditional residential side, and that's a lot of just getting people on the phone, establishing contact, establishing relationships, following up, and getting deals closed that way.
Okay, well, Craig, we ask guests to provide a golden nugget. And I know you provided one for Real Estate Rockstars, but we're asking for another one. Is there some sort of checklist, cheat sheet, house hacker, specialty, magic thing that you could send for our listeners?
Okay, how about this? So we have, this is now it's kind of publicly available online, but not everyone knows about it. We just launched it today. But so we have every area of the Metro Denver area kind of broken out on our website, where you can see what the room rents are, what the STR regulations are, what the STR rates are, et cetera, et cetera. And so if your audience wants to just look at that and they can basically emulate it for their own clients in their own markets, that might be helpful, because it's kind of like a template that they can use.
Dude, that's
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the website? Okay, so that is thefiteam.com, and then you click on investing areas. That's brilliant. So that's super, super helpful. So if anybody here wanted a house hack, go on that website, look up, Craig has done the research for you. Or if you want to emulate it in your city, do that. Thank you, Craig, for uploading that. That's awesome. The link will also be in the show notes. So, but yeah, before we head to our wrap-up questions, is there any last message that you want to leave the audience of agents?
I would just say that, it's getting really hard to be a real estate agent out there. And so, but the persistence of just doing constant lead gen, setting your weekends aside to do showings as much as you can, and just kind of getting into a rhythm and getting into that process is going to be huge, because you just need to have one massive year to really change your life. Right. And then that's kind of what happened, with me too, was I had one massive year. It totally changed my life. And now I've got the team. Now I do a little bit of production, but not nearly as much, because now I'm focus on growing and helping the team, which really alleviates me of a lot of time. And so I'm able to kind of do more of what I want versus just spending my whole weekend doing showings. So yeah, and it may not be your goal to have a team. I would say like there's a lot of pros and cons to it, and I go back and forth as to whether it's worth it or not every day. But overall, it's been quite the journey.
First wrap up question: what's your favorite app or tool?
Probably our CRM, Sierra. It's really good. So
Sierra.
Is that helpful?
Okay.
Yeah,
that is. Okay, sweet. And then I know that events, actually, yeah, what events are you going to this year or in the next 12 months?
BPCon is definitely one. And honestly, I think I'm trying to go less events because I've just been conferenced out. I think we talked about with you guys about this before. So yeah, doing less events. I think BPCon's the only one on the docket. And yeah, basically if I'm not speaking at an event, I probably won't be going. And that's not to just like pump my own head. I just not getting that much value anymore based on what I'm looking to do. It's like a little bit too, I haven't found that like conference that has all my answers yet, now that I'm a little bit more advanced.
Yeah, definitely. How can we help you in your business?
I think you already have by allowing me to come on the show. But if you know anybody in the Denver area that's looking to house hack, or we're in Denver, Idaho, Southern California, and Washington. So if you're in any of those areas and you want a house hack, or you're an agent and want to join an investor friendly agent team, you want to join the FI team, we'd be happy to sit down and see if you're a good fit.
Yeah. And how can people find you? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at the FI guy. We've got our podcast, Investify. And you can look at our team, thefiteam.com.
And again, in case you have not listened to Investify, it is, I mean, if I may say so myself, it is a great real estate investing podcast. We interview like people from at all levels, whether they're beginning or way advanced. So you'll get a lot of variety. So take a listen. Invest, the number 2, FI for financial independence. You can also find us on the gram as well. We're The Shelby Show, Allie the Agent. And that's it for today. So Craig, thank you so much for coming on. And for the audience, be a bro and share this show.
Thanks so much for listening, dude. If you want the golden nugget that this guest provided, see the show notes or just go straight to theagentgoldmine.com. That's where we keep all our resources for you. Till next time.